starting. Hello, welcome to Psyched Minds. We are reading In Therapy by Susie Orbach. If you have not subscribed yet and you are new, do subscribe, like, and share. You can check out the other videos that I have read or the books that I have read. They are in the playlist section. You can get any book that you want, that you like. You can go and follow through it. Okay. We are reading In Therapy by Susie Orbach, Case of John. Page number 97, first session. John is in his 60s and retired. He was formerly a union official on the railways. His second wife left him and he came to me in despair. I have been seeing him for 18 months. He is a warm man with a self depreciating laugh. At the beginning of therapy, he wore his body heavily. He is no small man, but it seems to be all a part of him now. I always hear him huffing and puffing his way up the long staircase to my consulting room. Despite being breathless, he begins to talk before he sits down. Oh, John, over a lovely day. I felt very happy this morning. The sun, I know it's cold, but I love this kind of day. It's crisp, wakes you up. I'm feeling good actually. I always find it difficult to start speaking. I know it's the way this works. Um, well, when I first came here, it wasn't me, just didn't feel right. You know, but it's really worked for me talking to you. Um I have never done this kind of thing before I met you, and I've talked about things, really intimate things that I've never said to anybody, not even my ex-wife. So anyway, uh that's why was happy this morning because I came out and then the sun was out and I thought I really, really love this work that we are doing, Susie. Uh huh. John, I actually wanted to ask you something because um I think it was a documentary about therapist I saw and it said, well, I come once a week. Well, I mean, there's people, it said on this film, that go like every day to therapy, which, 6 months ago, a year ago, I would have thought, I mean, that's ridiculous, indulgent. But then, or rather now, I thought maybe I would like to come more often to see you actually. And I don't know how often you see people, but I mean, it's really releasing me talking to you, being here. And I would like to come 3, 4 times a week because there is so much, in here, beats his chest, that I really want to talk to you about. I was walking up the hill in the sun. I thought I really wanted to see Susie. I want to see her more and talk to her more about all these things. And I'm 66 and I felt like a young man coming up that hill. Susie. Uh huh. I don't respond to John's request at this point. I don't explore it further as I sense he will tell me more about this impulse. Coming twice a week could make sense, but I'm not sure. The rhythm of a weekly session with time to digest things in between has felt right up until now. John. And I thought, why not, I don't want to waste whatever time I have got left. I want to really push forward now in my life. And so I want to come more often and I want to would I could I see you outside of the room? I mean, I know I'm probably breaking every rule in the book, but there's this thing that I do in the week. I don't have many friends. I'm not lonely, but I don't go out with people very much, and there's things I see. I go on walking trips. Sometimes I see a film, and I think the only person I want to share this with is you, Susie. Mm-hmm. I didn't see this coming. Of course, it isn't unusual for a person to want to see more of their therapist. It isn't unusual that what happens in the outside world is played with reference to the therapist. The therapy relationship can be side of emotional truths and connections that aren't yet transferred to the outside world. And so the significance of being understood by the therapist can take an enormous power. And as John says, he wants to share the beauty that he is seeing, the reflections he's having, the experiences he is now bursting with. John, I know I'm probably not meant to say that loud. And Susie, it's helpful when you say what's on your mind. John, yeah. Susie, I think what you are telling me is that it's exciting as well as a relief to feel that you can say what you want to say and discover what you want to say and look at things afresh, whether it's in this room or outside. John. Yeah. Susie. And you are in a hurry and you want to live. John. Yeah, yes, because I was just walking around half dead for lots of time, for so many years. And I'm in a hurry. And you said there's not such a thing as I am not meant to say and things I probably shouldn't say. But I've got to say, I know I love you, Susie. I do. Susie. Uh huh. John. And I know that's wrong and bad, and I know it. I just think about you all the time outside, and I have felt like this about a woman many, many years ago, but not for a long time. I have thought about it and I've thought I'll stop myself saying this because it is stupid, but I do love you. I'm in love with you, and that's why I want to be here. And I want to see you outside the room. I want to share my life with you, and I know I just have these feelings about you. I love you. It's all I've got. I was walking up that hill, and I thought I've got to tell her. I've got to tell Susie that I'm in love with her. So I'm sorry, but there it is. Susie, I think that's Look, it's important what you have said. I don't want to just put a dagger through everything you have said, but I think part of why this feels really important and special and why our relationship feels so compelling, John, yeah, Susie, is because I am in this relationship to you. I am listening, I am hearing, I am thinking. I'm feeling with you the struggles you are going through, and that, John, isn't something we could transfer to outside of this room. This is a delicate moment. The whole of the session is delicate. John finds himself enamored of me, and I have to find a way to acknowledge his feelings without in any way humiliating him. A declaration of love can be embarrassing if not reciprocated in ordinary circumstances, and these are not ordinary circumstances. It's a cliche to say that patients fall in love with their therapist, but like all cliches, there is something accurate about the intensity of the relationship and feelings that can be aroused on both sides because of the intimacy and sealed nature of the consulting room. Therapists always fall, or at least this therapist always falls for some aspect of the person they are working with. I don't mean this in a sexual manner, but in the sense that a deep affection, a desire to understand and reach the other, a wish to connect and to be helpful are powerful dimensions of my experience. In order to work with someone for a considerable amount of time and to weather the difficulties we will encounter along the way as they endeavor to change, and with the challenges they will throw at me, the facts of affection will count for a great deal. In John's case, I feel a profound respect for him in his struggle. His warmth has touched me, as has his despair to repair what's gone so wrong. But love in the way he's talking about has never occurred to me with him. John. But I think it could be with us. Now we are in classical Freudian analysis territory. Indeed, the development of the talking cure pioneered by Freud and Breuer at the end of the 19th century depended on their being able to understand phenomena that occurred in the therapy, naming it as a feature of the therapeutic relationship and then using it in the therapeutic work. The phenomena they call transference describes the often intense feelings as an analyze and has towards the therapist stimulated by the therapeutic setting. These include love and longing, but they could also include hate or disregard. Such feelings occur in other quasi authority relationships too, but what is particular to psychoanalysis is its study of the feelings that are transferred to the therapist and the use that can be made of it. Transference can be understood as a reflection of what is in the individual's unconscious mind about the nature of the relationship. It is a version of his or her experience about how relationships of closeness, mainly learned in the family, pan out, but it isn't simply that. The power of the early experience shapes the individual's expectations about relationships in such a way that this psychological imprint is unknowingly foisted onto new romantic relationships. This means that one may treat a teacher like a father or a boyfriend as a mother without realizing it. In new relationships, there is often a psychological tussle inside the individual between seeing the loved person, the other, as she or he actually is, and the inner and often unconscious imprint that is held of the how previous important relationships have been experienced and therefore will or should be. To complicate the matter further, there is often the hope of a new relationship fulfilling and fixing the hurts and disappointment from before, while at the same time being itself rewritten as an already known relationship. If an individual has had hard beginnings, love and attachment will not necessarily be straightforward. It could be expressed as over evaluating the other and not being able to manage when they turn out to be just a person. When the admired one falls off the white steed, they are denigrated, but that then becomes speedily forgotten and they are reinstated as the person who can or could understand, fix, and make magic. The transference then is a projection or a stand in for earlier significant relationships. The therapist is not seen as their own person or as a psychological lifeline, but as one whose affection and acceptance are craved. Of course, the desire for acceptance may be hidden behind porcupine spikes. It may show itself in a testing way through the analysand being irritating and dismissive or contemptuous, or through an excited kind of love. The transference that emerges, and it can change during the course of a therapy, become one of the dimensions of the therapy which comes into play. The therapist examines and shares this with their analysand and the analysand in the effort to clarify the unconscious process and projections which may occur. For Freud, the study of a love transference was predictable. He anticipated that many of the women he saw would fall for him. His take on this was illuminating. He saw transference love, about which he wrote a very important paper which has been discussed and written about by psychoanalysts many times, as a way for individuals to avoid the work of the therapy by falling in love with the therapist. Freud argues they refuse to see the unconscious process at work in their difficulties. They fall in order to sidestep, to be rescued by a father figure of authority and warmth, rather than investigate the internalization of the parental relationship inside their psyche, to be the child and not the father's partner. I don't believe this is what John is doing. I take his falling as an expression for his delight in finding that he can be understood and can be open to the world again. I see it not as a distraction from the therapy, but as an indicator, as he says, of becoming alive again. That it has landed on me is surely because we have established an important connection. I'm thrilled by his coming alive. I treasure it and I make the work rewarding. I have every expectation that this desire will be available to him in a relationship that will be possible down the line. Susie, do you think it is possible, John, that it is this opening up that you fear long losing? I see what is happening for you, especially these feelings towards me, as what has been provoked by your coming to therapy, and that in time you will be taking this passion and desire into your daily life outside the therapy. I think you are looking at it as though it is to do with me rather than what we are doing together and how it's. John, yes. Susie, allowing you to feel a different kind of confidence or realness, or. John, crestfallen. Well, you don't feel it, do you? Um, I, um, I just thought as I walked up that hill, I was thinking about all the things we talked about, the things that have gone wrong. I thought, and I know you. You are saying I'm holding you up as a way out of dealing with those things, and I just thought I would say it because I thought it's just not. It's not just that. It is actually about you, Susie. And I thought I have to say it, and I thought I can't bear it if she's. And now he's crying. If she says no, no, the thing is, I know it's stupid, but I do love you. Crying. Sorry. Susie, I don't think it's about sorry. And it's not that I am not affected or moved by what you are saying. I want to suggest that this is about the loss, not just of your daughter Meg, but of your first wife and John. Yeah, but Susie, your anguish about not being able to bring yourself to them because. John, I did. I tried to. Well, Susie, yeah, but not just you. They couldn't either. It's. John, but that's why we connect so well. It's like that's what I didn't have with them. Susie, yes, but I'm not a wife. John, I know, but. Susie, I'm not a partner. I'm a partner in the search to help you find those aspects of you that haven't been able to be alive for you. and you have become interested in your life so that you have become a curious man. You have got passion, a beating heart, and your senses and emotions are opened up. John, yeah. And I think we have got a lot more time to spend together within this context, John. But I think about you like in bed, and I'm sorry, I do. I really want to make love to you, Susie. Uh huh. John, Susie. But does it make sense if I say I think that you are wanting to show your gratitude? I think we can both treasure that and appreciate that you feel very affected by being attached and cared for and thought about here. John, yeah. Susie, and you know how seriously I take your troubles. John, yes, I do. Susie, and you know the ways in which we both enjoy the things that have been changing for you. John, yeah. Susie, but I think that we need to hold this together between us and just. John, yeah, Susie, but it is not going to happen, and I want to continue to be available to you. John, yeah, no, I'm sorry. You're not going to kick me out to turn me away because this means so much to me being here. Oh dear, I feel terrible now. Laughs. Susie, can we go at it the other way round? Can I say that this is because of my concern for you that I'm doing my job and this is the best I can be for you, John? As for feeling sorry or feeling stupid, I know that is uncomfortable and part of what comes up between because of what we are doing here as we talk about things. It's important that you didn't hold back on this because it will have some meaning and it will shake out in a different way which we don't know yet. John, yeah. Susie, let's meet next week as usual. John, yeah, okay, we'll meet next week. I'm sorry, I mean, I'm not sorry, and I am sorry. You know what I mean? When I first came and I could hardly speak, laughs. And I was thinking if certain people could see me now, they would be laughing so much. John in therapy, what a laugh. And I just didn't know what to say. I had not a clue, and I hated. I didn't hate you, but I thought I just felt like you were a teacher, And then I thought this morning on this sunny day, I thought, my God, all these months and now I can't wait to get here and talk to you. And you always said you were great because you didn't tell me off and you didn't look impatient. You just said, try to speak, try to tell. And I thought this morning, well, I will. And how wonderful that Susie has got me that to that place. But it's, well, I thought I would be walking out. I thought I might be walking out and skipping down the steps. And Susie, John, it would be a disservice to you to send you out skipping down the steps because you woke up and you felt this and you shared it. And then it all happened because we are doing something that is about the rest of your life. John, yeah. Susie, uh huh. John, yeah. Susie, all right, so I'll see you next week. John, yeah, you are my life now, but I am not yours. I don't mean to embarrass you. I'm stupid. I slapped my wrist, slaps wrist. I'm not going to go down the river with you, but you are very important to me, and I'm glad I said what I did. Susie, John, I'll see you next week. John, yes, thank you. Bye now. Susie, bye bye. John walks out quite full. He's disappointed, yes, but not only that, I was surprised by the direction of this therapy session. Yet surprise is what keeps a therapist on her toes. We can never know what is coming because therapy is a subversive kind of conversation which can crackle with energy or fear, despair or hope. We follow the feelings, the ideas, the tempo, the timbre of the patient's voice, finding ways of connecting even when we might, as in this instance with John, refuse what he wishes. So much of therapy is involved in the view of disillusionment. We listen to what the person says and how it is said, and we put that together with our knowledge of how the individual is in the room with us. We don't do so much pierce the bubble of their narrative as layer it, turn it inside out, look at it from unexpected perspectives, join it with what we know of how the individual has construed his or her circumstances. In this endeavor, we move away from a picture of blame My wife didn't understand me, my parents were cruel or negligent, to a more nuanced story of who they were in their psychological or social circumstances and their capacities. The structure of class, as with John, also comes into consideration, as do all the grand narratives which impact our world and the world of our parents and loved ones. To see how the individual mind, feelings, bodies, and sense of self were forged in historic time and social attitudes, this moves us away from the view of the innocent and towards more complexity and a curiously enlightened disillusionment. This enlightening disillusionment enables the individual to be in present without fantastical ideas about who they are or how hard done by they were. They can inhabit their history in new ways and have a richer present. Second session. We are 4 months on from our last session in which John declared his love for me and his wish to see me outside the sessions. We have worked steadily together since then, with most discussions about his estranged daughter, his early family life, and his marriages. Susie. Hello. John. Oh, hello. It's John. Susie. Hi, John. John. Hi, Susie. What a lovely day. Susie. Gorgeous. John. I'm a bit puffed. I'm a bit embarrassed today. You see, the thing is, I have met somebody a few weeks ago and I need to talk about it. I haven't told you yet, but it's been playing on my mind. I think I've got to tell you because I feel a bit ashamed telling you, really. John has recognized that when he is embarrassed or reluctant to share things with me, it is a signal alerting him to what he needs to speak about. What comes out is a great rush of words and ums. John. I met this girl, Hiva. She's Polish, and it's how I met her that I'm embarrassed about with you. We haven't really talked about sexual things very much, and I think I need to know. You see, she because I think you might disapprove of me and this relationship with Eva, this girl. I need to talk about that as well, but I'm rather frightened of your being angry or disapproving of what I've done. Because she, I met her in a massage parlor. I didn't actually, I met her in a cafe first, but then I saw where she worked and I didn't mean to go in there. And I didn't, but she kept, the way she smiled when I was just chatting to her in the cafe kind of haunted me. And I thought, well, the only way I'm going to see her more is to go into that place, which I did 2 days later. And I was thinking, I'm just going in there to talk to her to but that's not the way it worked. And anyway, then after that night, we have seen each other quite a lot the last 3 weeks, and she's a lovely girl. I'm also embarrassed because she's much younger than me, obviously, and it is getting to a point where I have to make some decisions about it, really, because she wants to be with me. I think she's got a little boy, 8 years old, who I'm very fond of, actually, but she wants more than I'm giving her, really, or can see myself giving to her. Although I'm very fond of her, she's a lovely girl. But I thought the last couple of sessions since I have met her, I haven't mentioned it just because I felt ashamed and I'm a bit frightened of your disapproval, because what you say means a lot to me and I feel like I've been a naughty child, and as though I'll be punished. Susie, what's the naughty part? Is it the meeting somebody? Is it John? No, it's the way I met her. It's like paying for that. Susie, physical comfort and sexual release. John, yes, yeah. Susie, uh huh. John, physical comfort, yeah. And then, I keep saying, well, I pay for a bottle of milk, I pay for bread, I pay you for this, I pay to ride on the bus. Why shouldn't I pay for that? But then it doesn't really work because I know that area is very difficult and I can't quite. You're famous for being a feminist, and I grew up, I've met a lot of feminist women. I was always part of that consciousness, if you like. In the Labour Party, in the union, we were all trying to be correct and respectful to women. And Susie, well, that's lovely, John, but could we take that as known between us? And would you just try and tell me what has happened? You were haunted by her smile. You went to the parlor. John, yeah. Susie, have you been going to the parlor a lot? Or you see her outside of the parlor? John. No, I see her outside. Yes, I only went there once. Susie. Right, okay. So can we just lift off the judgment for a second so I can understand the dilemma you are in? John. Okay, right, because I do need, yes. I need to talk to you about that. Anyway, it's kind of ironic because as you know, I've been wanting intimacy, closeness, and I have found it with this girl. I mean, it's only weeks, but she's very giving. She's very, and now I'm feeling I want to get away. Susie. Uh huh. John. But I feel guilty. I feel bad because she's sort of depending on me now. And Susie, can you help me understand how that happened in 2 weeks? How did she move from the two of you having a romance to her being dependent on you? Is that what is happening or what you fear occurring? John. Yeah, well, it has not happened yet, but I can feel it coming. She's her little boy. A lot of it is about her, about the boy, and I think she has very quickly seen me as though she was waiting for somebody like me to come along. And she says, you know, you are not like most of the twats, excuse my language, that she met in that massage parlor. And she said, most of them are drunk, young, and stupid, and I despise them. I represent a sort of different kind of client, really, and because I wanted to talk to her and to find out about her as well as anything sexual, she sort of fell for that. Susie. Uh huh. John. You know, like a drowning man to a plank. I think she sees me as her savior, and I mean, she's had a lot of trouble in her life. The father of the boy is this appalling drunk bully who is still in Poland, and she wants to get out of the work she's doing. She's just doing it because it pays her well. She's not really qualified, so she can't get a professional job. And yeah, you know, her grandfather knew Lech Walesa. Susie, yes. John, she's from Gdansk. And when she told me that, I thought, bloody hell, this is like the socialist paradise, you know, the intimacy, the history, the politics. But because I had been to Poland before and I had done a tour of the shipyards, and he was like, what happened with solidarity and everything? Susie, uh huh. John, it was like I was tapping into this wonderful piece of my life. Susie, uh huh. John, and but then we had one of our first arguments the other day. She can't stand Lech Walesa. She thinks he's dreadful, lying, old fashioned, old party hack, and to her, that struggle, solidarity, and that party of the history of her country, it doesn't mean anything. And so we had this row. I mean, and I felt very alienated. Susie, uh huh. John. Although I'm very fond of her, I think I can't keep going down this road. She wants to move in. She wants us to live together now, and she wants me to be like a father to the boy, or grandfather even. And he's lovely lad. I'm very fond of him. We have done a couple of things together, but I'm thinking I can't. I just think we would have a lot of rows because she's half my age. Susie. Uh-huh, but John. And she wants to do things. I know she does, you know, that I have no interest in, and she has curbed that because she knows who I am. But I think that would be, if it went further, it would be awful. Susie. But do you think that what you might be embarrassed about with me is that you forgot your own needs in this? That you were taken over by being interested in her and her interested in you, and that maybe you don't quite approve of whether you have got to in this, not in terms of the massaging parlor, but getting in so far so quickly. John. Yes. Susie. And not having your own eye on you or ear on it. Does that make any sense? John. My own ear on me and what I need? You mean? Susie. Yeah. John. Yes. But yes, that does make sense. I mean, if I'm honest, I have been married twice. Over the last few years, I have had a few disastrous dates with various women. My first wife left me for somebody more artistic. My second wife left me because, well, to tell you the truth, I don't quite know. Anyway, the whole love sex situation is a disaster area for me. And like It's broken, and I'm not getting younger, and you think, bloody hell, is that it? All this thing that people write about and talk about, and you see films about how it is to be sexually with somebody who you are politically, intellectually, emotionally connected with. And I was thinking the other day with Hiva, I thought it's not going to happen. For a moment, I thought, oh, maybe it can happen with a woman half my age. And then I thought, no, it would be a disaster like all the other times. So I think what I'm saying is, my ear on my own needs. Susie. Uh huh. John. It's kind of coming up deaf, huh? You wrote that book, Impossibility of Sex? Susie. Uh huh. John. Well, to me, that says it a lot. Says it all. The title says it all. It's impossible. Huh. I mean, not just sex, but like relationships that include sex. Huh. It's impossible. And I suppose what I'm worried about, what I'm feeling now, I mean, I did feel embarrassed about how I met her because I thought, oh God, Susie is going to like think I'm scum, or for paying for sex. But because it was like, I read somewhere in a book, it's like somebody had met a girl. I think it was in the Far East. It was something like this, like a Thai girl in one of those sex places in Bangkok, and they developed a relationship, and it was very romantic. And he said it was as though he had found the most beautiful orchid growing in a heap of dung, huh? And I thought, yes, I understand that. How beautiful. It doesn't matter where you meet. And I thought this girl, Hiva, with her history, with her family, with the way she smiles, she's a very lovely woman. And I thought, is this a flower that I have found in a, like a dirty corner of the farmyard sort of thing? And then, well, after this row we had, it was like, no, it's just another nettle. Not her fault. I'm not blaming her. It's not her fault. It's just I can't do that love. The love, sex, romance thing. It's the impossibility of Susie. So you felt very engaged with her, John. At first I did, yeah, Susie. And then you were really disappointed to discover that the pollen and the grandpa that you have an affinity to bear no relationship to her desire as a young woman of a different generation who is over here and looking to capitalism. John. Yeah, well, Susie. And then you were really disappointed to discover that the Poland and the grandpa that you have an affinity to bears no relationship to her desire as a young woman of a different generation who is over here and looking to capitalism. John. Yeah, well, Susie. She's not on the same page. You had an encounter. She's lovely, but you are disappointed that it can't go further. I'm not sure why you are throwing the whole idea about relationship, love, sex out the window. Perhaps this could have been like a little something for you. You didn't sign on the dotted line to look after her and her son. You had an encounter. John. No, I didn't. Susie. You had an encounter. John. Yeah, no, that's fine. I suppose it's like it's the disappointment in me, really. Susie. Uh huh. John. It's not. I felt bad the other day because I knew really that it's not really the right thing. And it would be a source of unhappiness in the long run, like with my previous wives. Susie. But it is reassuring that you could hear. Maybe your ear is much more open. Maybe you could see that the discrepancy between your desire and what is actually on offer is allowing you to take a pause and think. John. Yeah, but I mean, I'm of an age. That would make sense to me if I was like her age. If I was 34. Susie. You might not be able to think that at 34. We are talking now of a developmental leap. John is grappling towards the notion that he could become stirred up and excited, but in the face of things not fitting, he doesn't have to gloss over the differences between them. He can feel his disappointment and not trap himself or Hiva. John. I know, well, I didn't, but now it's like, well, if I keep postponing, I'll be dead because it hasn't worked out. None of them. Susie. Well, we are not talking about meeting a woman a week and going nuts over her and it all unfolding together neatly. John. No, but I don't think. Susie. We have survived your having a crush on me. John. Well, yeah. Susie, now you have got crush on somebody else. You were very drawn to somebody, and that made you feel presumably like you had things to give and live in a certain kind of way. Now we are pressing the pause button to get closer to what you are wanting and what might work for you. John, yeah. Susie, I'm not saying it would be easy, but John, yes, yes. You remember when I'm embarrassed again now, but my crush on you? Susie, uh huh. John, when I said I wanted to take you places? Susie, yes. John, well, I took Hiva down the river on a boat to a little pub in Deptford. With dinner by candlelight, I did that with Hiva, and I felt it was funny. I felt a bit guilty because I really had wanted to take you there. Susie, you're saying that is helpful because it is showing us that you have got a parcel of desire or need, a longing to give or share, but instead of it being bespoke to the person, it got transferred from one person to the other. John, yes, that is right. Susie, and what I think we are trying to work on together is what might make love possible rather than impossible. What's the texture of relating what is the thing between this person and me rather than what is a generic love affair? John. Susie. And what you have done in 2 weeks is to experiment, to try to get to know somebody and. John. Yes. Susie. And finding them charming and lovely, but maybe not for you? John. Yes. Susie. Rather than you are not for her, she may not be for you. John. That's right, yes. I think I just felt a sort of not despair, that's too strong a word, but a sort of realization that when you get to a point in life, it is not just the number of years you think. I have had all my chances. I know you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think how did that happen that I mean, you see, I can go out tomorrow and I can all these internet things and hundreds and thousands of people you could meet, one of whom might be the right one, but I am kind of feeling it's pointless because the efforts of I thought I really wanted it. You see, like I thought I really wanted to explore that and meet a lot of people and renew my life, but actually this isn't it. I just feel like, oh, give up. What's the point? Susie. Well, is there a place between giving up and meeting hundreds of people? Can there be a place that goes, oh, I felt that desire and that feeling of connection and understanding with Susie, then I risk feeling something with Hiva, but actually, perhaps there wasn't quite enough commonality. That's like going out and feeling your way. It's not the roots ball, it's not the roulette ball that lands on the right number the first time. John, yes. Susie, we could be discussing it from the point of view that you are avoiding something with her, and maybe you feel that is what is going on. But I hear something else, John, which is if I can't get it right the first go, then I might as well give up. John, yeah. Susie, and maybe, but John, yeah. Susie, I think what is important is that you have noticed your needs and you noticed when it didn't fit for you, when you didn't want to stretch. One could stretch with someone whose politics might be different, of course you could, but you would have to have an awful lot going for that to happen. John, yes, yes, just thought of something. Susie, what is that smile? John, well, it's funny thing, laughing. I read this book, The Magus. Have you read that book? It's a wonderful book set in a Greek island. The main character in it is talking, he's like the mentor guide, wise old man to the young English man who visits the island. And I can't remember how it comes up, but he says there was a chap who came to live on this island on his own. He had no family. He brought one of the little disused cottages on the coast of this island and he kept a herd of goats and they lived in the house with him. He was not social. Somebody delivered his food and he was occasionally visited by the old man who is narrating the story. And they would talk occasionally, and it was just this chap with the goats, and that was the only family he had. And the chap who was telling the story says he was the happiest man I've ever met. It makes me smile and it makes me sad all at the same time. Susie. Uh huh. John. And it's like, I think actually, if I was in a cottage in Derbyshire with a dog, I would be quite happy. But if I got there, I would be sitting there and I probably wouldn't be happy. But the story of this book, I understand that. He loves his goats. That's all a man needs. And I mean, he doesn't do anything dirty with them. It's like, it's just they are his friends. Susie. Yeah. John. And all the striving and the impossibility of sex. It's like, it drives me mad sometimes. I think just go and live with a dog, but that's because I am of an age. I'm getting a bit tired of it. That's what it is. And the thought of having to go out again, as it were, and look more is a bit exhausting, really. Susie. Well, could we take a pause, really? I mean, we need to stop in a second anyway. John. Oh, right, okay. Anyway. But the first thing, sorry, you must talk. Susie. It's more important that you do. John. Yes, I see. Let me say you are very important to me, and I thought the main thing was, I just felt a bit ashamed because of your judgment. You see, that's my fear. Because I feel like I have betrayed something. Susie. Because you got involved with a sex worker. John. Yeah, yeah. Susie. Well, politics has moved on a bit. John. Yeah, well. Susie. I'm sure you know there are a lot of different views about, but is that the issue? Or is it that you are embarrassed that you actually fell for somebody and that in doing so you were betraying our relationship? John. Something like that, yeah. Susie. Uh huh. John. Something in that area? Susie. That you sort of see us as being on the same page with the same ideas and sensibility. John. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Susie. Uh huh. And that maybe you thought I wouldn't want you to find somebody else for you. John. Yes, that as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Susie. Uh huh. John. I felt guilty. Susie. Uh huh. John. And yeah, yes, that's it really. Yeah, all of them. The women I have been connected with, this is going to sound wrong. Laughing. It's like I should have been with Susie, or else I should be like that man on the island with his goats. Sorry to compare you to the goats, but do you know what I mean? It's like Susie. Well, I think what you are saying is you want to be able to match what you are feeling with somebody who you think is listening and feeling it for and with you. John, that's right. Susie, and if you are not going to have that, can you find some peace in another way? John, yes. Susie, and the last thing you need is jangle. Look, can we leave it there for now? I know there are a lot of threads open. John, yes, yes, right. Well, I shall see you next time, and yeah, thank you. Susie, okay, see you next week. John, yes, thank you, Susie. John is interested in Hiva has opened up confusion. John's interest in Hiva has opened up confusion and questions in him about longing, connection, and morality. His concern that I would A disapprove and B feel betrayed are important subtext to the session which we couldn't take up fully, but which I know we will return to again. Therapy can be just like this. An issue is raised but not able to be explored in detail at the time. A drop or two is said, which opens up a space for thinking and feeling about the issue to commence before the dilemmas return, which they will do, either with clarity or with greater complexity. They are discussed further and then understandings can be assimilated. In ordinary conversation, we often seek to tie things up with a bow, but in therapy, things are allowed to dangle, and this isn't a shortcoming but a way in which psychic structural change occurs. Third session. The following week, Susie. Hello. John. Susie, it's John. Susie. Come in. The weather is still miraculously lovely. John. Isn't it? I love it. I love it. Yes, it's beautiful. It reminds me of something about a sunny day like this. It's about childhood. I don't know why, but days out with my parents, it takes me right back there. But in a happy way, like a good memory. Susie. Uh huh. John. I was thinking that a day like today, the sun on these beautiful trees in your garden walking up the road, It's like it takes me right back to a very happy place. Today, anyway, does. Anyway, it does. To childhood memories of going out for a picnic with my mom and dad and my brothers. The weather can do that sometimes. It just takes you straight back into a place. Anyway, it's good. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling, and I feel good because I've made some decisions, Susie, since last week, and I just want to run them past you because it's coming from a good place. It's not like I've gone mad or I'm doing things on impulses, running around like a lunatic. It's come to me quite slowly since the last session. It's kind of what you said, but it's also what I said. At first, I didn't hear it, but now I do. About having an ear on my own needs. I was thinking, well, I have been feeling that I can hear something now, and some things became very clear that I want to do, but I want to see if you agree. I'm going to see Hiva tonight actually, and I'm going to tell her that it's not going to work out the way she would like. I'm going to be quite difficult. It is going to be quite difficult because I think she's invested a lot of expectation in who I am and what I represent to her. And I'm not going to just pull the rug. I'm going to say I will try and be there for you as much as I can as a friend. Susie. Uh huh. John. So she's not abandoned, and yes, I'll be there for her as a friend. And then I'm going to go down to Somerset. This is a big decision. I'm going to reconnect with my daughter who lives near her mother in Shepton Mallet. I spoke to her on the phone a couple of days ago at the weekend, and we do speak occasionally every few months on the phone. And normally it's quite awkward because her mother is a bit anti me, and the daughter is in her orbit, so it is a bit hard for her. We just kind of exchange pleasantries normally, and this and that, and how are things. She's got a little boy now who I have seen once, Isaac. And anyway, this conversation, it was slightly different. I heard myself saying, Ali, I would really like to see you and your little boy, and I would like to be in touch more. And she, well, I was a bit frightened. I thought she might say, oh, I don't know, because mum might not like that. But she said, yes, that would be lovely. Why don't you come down? So that was a breakthrough. I said, tell your mother I'll see her as well, just for a cup of tea, just to say hello. There's no agenda, there's nothing going on except I would like to reconnect with my daughter and see how she's getting on. Susie. John. And then the biggest decision is I'm going to move out of London. I'm going to sell my flat. I'm going to buy a place in Derbyshire. I've been on the internet. I have seen a couple. I know what I want. What I was saying to you last week about living on my own with my dog, with a dog, I said that as a joke, really, a sort of joke. But then since last week, it's become what I want to do. And that's what I meant when you said, could I have my ear on something? I have my I had my ear on that actually, and it's singing to me loud and clear. And yeah, I read this wonderful quote. You'll know it. It's very famous. Most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their graves with their song still inside. And I thought, bloody hell. And it's funny how I kind of knew it, but I had forgotten it. And I saw it the other day. It was in the newspaper, and it spoke to me loud and clear. And I thought, what is my song? I mean, I've been singing a song all my life, but now my song isn't about Hiva or the women or the grumbling around and searching and despairing. It's like to live on those hills near where I grew up and to be a part of that land. I felt a great joy when I had that sort of epiphany that that is what I wanted. My ear heard that. And then I thought, I still want to see you. And that's not a problem, is it? Susie, why should it be a problem, John? John, right, great. Because I shall come down every week, so you will be the connection, a connection. What do I lose? I lose a lot of what I have been doing. I mean, I'm retired from the union now, but I still do work for them. I still campaign for Labour. I still chair a local meeting, the Labour Party. I still am politically connected to, just as a private citizen, really, and I'm going to lose all that. Susie, John. Now I feel guilty about that because it is part of who I am and what my dad was and what I believe in. But I wanted to ask your opinion, really. I mean, it's like, it's morally selfish what I'm doing. But do you know what? I'm asking your opinion, but in a funny way. I think I know the answer because there's part of this activity that I take part in, and there's a couple of people that I want to look after. That's not quite the right word, but there are a couple of, you might say, casualties of capitalism, who are union members who have fallen on hard times that I have made it my business to look after in a personal as well as in a union way. And I can still do that. I still feel that I can do that, whilst even though you see the song that is really playing in my head, the song that has been playing in my head all my life is community, union, party. And now the song that is playing in my head is solitude, peace, countryside, reflection. And it's like a hymn. It's like a joyful hymn that is playing. I can just see myself in this. If I have managed to buy it, this cottage in the peaks, and I mean, it's, I feel like it's selfish and it's not entirely in my line with my political values, but I've given my life to my political values, and I'm not going to drop them, and I'm not going to drop these people, the important ones, but I'm going to clear out a lot of the routine that I have been engaged with. I really feel it. I feel like I need to make that move. It was just after the last session I heard this triumphant trumpet. As John is sharing his thoughts, they become more elaborate. He has gone from imagining a move to sketching out how it might work for him in terms of being able to keep what is important to him going. It is incredibly heartening for a therapist to see him so active in relation to his needs, personal needs, which he has come to know about over the course of his therapy. Susie, uh huh. John, do you think it is selfish politically to retreat from the world? Susie, well, that's quite a week. John, it's a big week, I know. Susie, I don't think it has got anything to do with selfish. John, self, no. Ah, well, I'm glad you said that. Susie, I think it has to do with you having a chance to see what might matter to you now. John, yeah. Susie, what you might want to express now. John, yes. Susie, and the memory of your happy times from your childhood, which you came in with, and hooking up with those, the fact that you can find that in yourself now. John, yeah. And Susie, and pull to Derbyshire. John, yes. Susie, and maybe that Hiva helped you was to miss your own daughter and your own grandchild and find a way back to what is central in your personal life. Of course, your politics are totally central to you, but maybe they don't need to be expressed in the same way at this moment. John, yes. Susie, maybe the personal politics and care and connecting with your own child and grandchild and yourself are what this time is about. John, yes, yeah, I think that's right. And I think as long as I keep the connection to that, I'm thinking of two people in particular, ex railwaymen who have fallen on very hard times. Susie, uh huh. John, and this is like, yes, the politics is personal. A very fine union man, when I first started working for the union, I asked, why are we carrying all these financial burdens? To me, I couldn't see the logic of it, paying people who were alcoholic. One of them, he had been in a train crash. It was his fault as well, and he has fallen on very hard times. His families are broken up. He's been homeless, and the union picked him up and started paying him. And this very fine man, Mick, he said to me, if we don't look after him, then who will? And that's when I became a union man. The point is, there's two like that. Not his chap, he's long dead, but there's two like that. And I think my guilt about this idea of moving away from it all was really about those two. There are other people looking after them, but I know they feel a connection to me, and I have to keep that connection to them. And really, that's the answer to my problem, because that's the politics of the personal, and I will not abandon them. It's not like I'm going to Siberia, but it's discipline. And it's up to me, because there's going to be times when I won't want to, but I am going to keep coming here. And I'm going to keep in touch with those two men. And I'm going to visit them. And there's times when it's going to be the last thing I want to do. But anyway, I'm rambling now because I've sorted out my own problem. Thank you for what you said. It's been very helpful and, yes, personal for me now to find out, beating chest, something about me. Yes, and my daughter. And to live in that place on my own, that is fine. It has become, that's the song I'm hearing. So that's what I wanted to tell you anyway. So that's my, it's been a big week. Those are my aims. I think it's practical, it's financially possible. Bloody price of property, God in London. It's financially possible, and emotionally, I feel that's the song, That's the song that has been playing now. And it's really helped this week, helped last week. What we said and what you said about Hiva and all that, it's sort of really, I feel like I've moved on. I really do. And I know we haven't got long. There's one another thing which I take with me. If this new life works out, I take it with me in my heart to in my new life. Last week you brought it up and I was relieved because I didn't. I was frightened of mentioning it, but you mentioned my crush on you, which we went through that episode and we've survived it, and I'm still here. We are still talking. And the thing, like my daughter, all my past, all those relationships, good, bad, different times, whatever, my children, my son who died, I'm taking all of them in my heart. Susie, John, and my crush on you, I have to say, Susie, and don't get frightened. I'm not going to go mad. It's not a crush, it's love. Susie, John. And that's one of the things I've put in boundaries. I hold it in a box in my heart and I shall take that with me and I won't mention it. I won't burden you with it. I won't do anything except feel it and hold it in. Beating chest. You see, you are a very brilliant therapist because one time you said, just hold it. Like just very gentle but firm boundaries. All the things in our hearts that we can't, that don't go the way we want. And that was part of the week. I thought I have not got over my crush for you. I have not. I still feel those feelings, but it's not. You said the word jangle. It's not like a jangle. It's just sitting there like a rather beautiful thing, and it's sort of part of me. And it's all right. It's all right if it's all right for you. So, Susie, well, I suppose how I think about it is, of course, it's in you, but it's also between us, isn't it? John, yes. Susie, and it's a foundation for going forward, isn't it? John, yes, but I know. I mean, when I said about the crush in into inverted commas, I was saying to you because I was thinking I wanted to see you. I wanted to take you out. I wanted to take you down the river. And as I said to you last week, I went there with Hiva, and it was like I'm doing this thing, and she was up for it. She had never been on the river before, and candlelight dinner. What could be nicer? But I was just thinking this should be Susie. But the difference from the last time, Susie, John, is that I now know it is never going to happen. I know we are not going to go out to galleries and films and live happily ever after, and it's all right. So I really feel that, Susie, I'm not trying to give you a therapeutic conversion to make you feel better. It's like I suddenly felt, and it's like your gift to me because you have made me see that. You have made me feel that. It has taken a long time. It has taken quite a while. But this weekend, it was like it's kind of accumulated, and I feel it's all right. Susie, what I hear you saying is, and we'll have to stop on this, is that you trust it enough that you can move somewhere, that you can bear to confront the losses with your daughter and your grandson, and move forward now because you feel you have got something inside, and you could even go to Derbyshire. John, yeah. Susie, and hold on to the two guys from the union, even if it is a burden because you don't feel so depleted, so undernourished that you have some love inside of you. John, yes. Susie, I think that's what you are saying. John, yes. Susie, so it continues. John, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Susie, my absolute pleasure. John's therapy has allowed him to have a fuller sense of his self and capabilities. When he arrived, he was broken and lost and without a way forward. Slowly, we found words together, not so many at first, but many by this session, in which he has found a future that interests him. He's felt himself to be a loved human being, accepted and worthy, and that has given him confidence to listen to himself and follow new prompts rather than exist in train lines that fail to nourish. It's been a very satisfying therapy for us both. I imagine he will come down weekly for his session until they no longer entrust him. It has been a privilege and moving for me to work with him. That brings us to the end of the session with John, the case of John. Next case of Natalie, we will be reading in the next recording. I will be ending the stream. If you have not liked, subscribed, or followed, then do subscribe, like, and share. Bye bye for now. Take care and keep reading.